Okay, awesome. So yeah, welcome to week 3, day 2, everyone. So we're gonna start off today by talking about a little bit of review of args and quargs, or args is a short form for arguments. Um, and everyone can still see my screen, okay, right? Like nothing's like phasing in and out or anything like that. Okay, awesome. So args and quargs are used when you don't know the number of arguments that are being input. So you can also use args sometimes for an optional argument, but usually they're not used for that. So let's see what's a good example. Um Here, let's try to find like some random function. Let's call it func. They can say args are going to be the input. So an args are basically going to be a allow for as many inputs as the user provides. So you in a normal function definition, you'll have, variable one, variable two, or I guess argument's probably better. Argument one, argument two, arg three, etc. And then you can do things. Right, so let's say that we want to return uh, the sum of all of my arguments. So this function takes in 3 numbers every time, right? So I have to say arg1, arg2, arg3, 1, 2, 3. However, what if I wanted to sum up 6 numbers? So what if, well, I would have to do something like 1, 2, 3, and then I guess do like plus 4, 5, 6, something like that, right? I can only put in 3 arguments at a time. What if I want to keep it flexible? I want to sum up whatever argument the user inputs. That is where args comes in handy. So using this, I could say something like return the sum of all arguments. So functionally, if I input 1 number, I'm just going to use the run button because it's convenient. Boop, boop, boop. Well, okay, it won't work for 1 number. If we do one or if we do 2 numbers, what am I forgetting here?
Do you have to
Oh,
put them in a
that's why.
list?
It's because I kept the star. So I should also mention when you are using args, the star args relates to whatever like the overall inputs that you're putting in, but args itself as a singular thing, and we can print it out to see what it um, is whatever inputs you have to the function. So let me clear this console because it looks terrible with those error messages. So if we run the code now, we see that args, which are the inputs to my function, are 1 and 2, which are, you'll notice, exactly what I put in here. I never specified that args is only 2 things. So I can change it to be like, let's say 5 things. Then I have the numbers 1 through 5. If I did this with a regular function, right, what we had before, let's call this old. We had something like arg1, arg2, and then we would return arg1 plus arg2. So again, this will do the function old. This is equivalent to that. So these two are equivalent if you only have 2 inputs. However, let's try, let me do a print old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, this is for the old function where we only have 2 arguments allowed, but I'm putting in way more than 2. We run this, I get an error, and the error says func old takes 2 positional arguments. So it takes 1, 2 things, but we gave it 5. Versus when I run that same thing, but using our new function instead with args, which allows for an infinite number, an unspecified number of arguments, we don't get an error this time. Because again, it allows for an unspecified number of arguments. So that's the main benefit of using args versus specifying each individual argument. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
No, that was a pretty awesome explanation. That's super simple. But now, and if you were to print the sum, it would add up all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Here, why don't we do that? So we'll print args. We'll also print some of the arguments, which is what we're actually, let's just print out the function instead, because that'll return it. So let's run it again. And yep, it prints out the sum. And we can change this and add, another bunch of things as well and see what happens. And we'll see that the args changes based on the input, and so does whatever the function does with those args. So another thing to keep in mind is you will generally not see args used very often. It's because most of the time when you're writing a function, you know exactly what inputs and are going into it. There are some cases, like for this function, which is basically a summation function, where you might not know how many inputs your function has, because that depends on your user. Most of the time you will, but for the times when you might not know is where args are super useful. Any follow-up questions, or does that make sense?
Makes sense. So they're kind of like the lambdas. It's good to have the exposure to them, but they're not going to get used very much.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say sometimes you do end up using lambda functions when in your code. I've done it a handful of times, but it's the same thing where like good to know, not going to use it that much, but good to know because it's very helpful when you need it. Now the alternative to args is as well is you can always include a an input that is intended to be a list. So for example, here I have args where I can just type out all of my inputs together. I could also do the same thing and just say define list, and we could say like arg list, which is what we'll call it, or some arg list. And if I wanted to do this equivalent operation with my list function, all I need to do is put in a list for arg list and make that a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it would do the same thing. The only difference is in func list, I'm taking in one argument, which is intended to be a list. Whereas when I'm using args in this way, I'm still taking in an unspecified number of arguments. All right. I think we spent a healthy amount of time on args and chords. So let's comment all this out. And let's move on to today's lesson topic, Regex. So has anyone here used Regex before?
I haven't.
Okay, Nicole, I'm seeing that you have. And let's see, Cisco, have you? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna turn over the class to you guys. Okay, not entirely. But let's see, Cisco, since I haven't heard from you yet today, would you like to tell us a little bit about in your or when and how have you used Regex in the past? And then also, what is Regex? Just like in your opinion.
Well, Regex is essentially it uses patterns. It uses patterns to uh, kind of compare compare a value to the pattern that you have designated for. So, for instance, it's kind of like a it's kind of like using that. Well, you can use it a lot of times with a conditional statement, right? So you say you have a string with only lowercase letters in it. Well, regex will allow you to basically say if string, if the value in this string uh, basically matches only lowercase letters, do this. Otherwise, do something else, right? And regex is a pattern matching function, well, pattern matching feature that we can implement to help us kind of do exactly that, match certain values under a certain condition.
That's a pretty good good summary. Thank you. Nick, would you like to add anything or give an example or anything like that?
Well, what I've used it with is kind of for like data cleaning type purposes. So we would take large amounts of like reporting or news in something and clean everything up. So we'd pull out all the phone numbers, names, places, stuff like that, and throw it through one of our tools. And you would just have to kind of look like a flow chart where you would just build it and then have to add in like the different regex or reject whatever I called it regex, but um stuff in there to clean everything, and then you'd send it out to the visualization tool, and that way you could have like lists of phone numbers, lists of names, lists of places, and stuff like that. So I used it mainly to clean like large sets of data.
Yeah, thanks for that example. So yeah, I think as both of you sort of outlined, the main principle behind regex or regex, but I will use what I like to call the correct pronunciation of regex, but you're welcome to disagree. It's basically string pattern. So think about this sort of like, I guess it's hard to conceptualize it without giving an example. But actually, here's one. Let's say that I give you a sentence and I want you to check if a specific word is in the sentence or not. That's like a super elementary use case where regex can come in handy. Alternatively, what if I say I have a sentence, I'm not looking for a specific word, but I want you to tell me if there are any words in the sentence that start with the letter A, or that have 5 letters, or words that do not include any vowels, something like that. And those are all patterns that we can come up with, that we can use regex, this tool, to help us identify and find and pull out. So I think like Nicole mentioned, some of the main use cases are going to be for like data cleaning is a big one in terms of you can also use it for data formatting. So like for example, if you have working with 3 different databases, one of them might have the date in the format, YYYY Another one might have it as you know let's see, what's another format? Date, month, year. Another one might have it as like date, month, year. These 3 things are completely different formats, but they have the same information. So if I'm trying to correlate information between 2 databases, one of which is reporting dates this way, the other one is reporting it completely flipped, I want to make sure I can extract the dates and put them in the same format. And that's something that regex can help you do. It doesn't do the formatting for you, but it can help you do it. And then let's see, another one is gonna very simple. It's text extraction. So again, so I'm looking for those patterns that you identify. Those are probably the main 2 I can think of off the top of my head. But there's more. So, how does one do regex in Python? Or what is the process of doing regex? So when you use regex, there is sort of a 3-step process. The first one is you're going to create or define the pattern you want to search for. I'll label this as a 1. Once you've defined that pattern, you're going to apply pattern to your source string. And then lastly, you're going to examine the output from Regex related functions. So for example, let's say that I have, let's call it my sentence is, it is very hot outside today. That's my sentence. Let's say the pattern that I want to search for is, I want to see if this has the word hot in it. If my sentence has the word hot in it or not. So we've this one, my sentence will essentially act as our source string. The pattern is, well, that's the pattern that we're going to apply to Regex. And oh, I should mention, we also have to import the Regex library. So in Python, you have to import RE, which is a library or a module that, as it says here, it does regular expression mashing operations, and it talks about a bunch of special characters that we will not talk about right now. So let's import Regex module, so that way we can use the functions contained inside it. Does everyone also feel relatively comfortable with the concept of importing modules in Python?
Yeah, it seemed pretty simple. We've had to import a couple of things recently. But are you doing that for every file, or like once you import it, it's always going to be in your Python?
Every file. So importing is, think about it kind of like a spice cabinet. So in your spice cabinet, you have like salt, pepper, paprika, sugar, cinnamon, goodness knows what stuff. So when you import, it's kind of like you need to take the spice out of the spice cabinet, put it on the food, and then put it back. So if I put salt in, or salt's a bad example. If I put cinnamon in my toast, I guess, does that necessarily mean the cinnamon's going to be in my coffee or in my salad? No, right? So I need to put the cinnamon on each thing that I wanted. Same sort of thing. In each Python file, I need to import whatever I want every time. However, if I go to the store and buy cinnamon and put it in my cabinet, it stays in my cabinet forever, or forever in quotes. That's like putting something in your cabinet for use is where pip install comes in. Have you guys seen that before?
We've had to do it a few times.
Okay, yeah, so pip install is what you use to install packages on your computer, or as we'll talk about later, in a virtual environment, so that way you can use them later. But that is a distinct part of the process. Does that help? Any questions?
No, I'm glad you break it down very simply for me. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, so now that we've imported the Regex library, let's go through a couple functions. So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to use the Regex search function. So we're going to print out re.search. Now let's see what this thing says. So it takes in a pattern and a string, and we'll forget the flags and all that. But let's read through this and see what it says. Scanned through the string looking for a match to the pattern, returning a match object, or none if no match was found. First question. What does the search function take as its inputs?
You got a pattern, the string, and flags.
Does the order matter?
Yes.
So in our case, what order should I put things in?
You want to you can place pattern for pattern yeah and then the sentence
All right, so that's the first part. The second thing, let's see. I'm gonna open this back up. Adam, what should the re.search function return? Is it going to give me a string? Is it going to give me an index? Or something else?
Okay, I was muted. It should return a string, should it not?
What does the documentation say?
Scan.
Or here, let me move my camera away. Like so if you mouse over a function in VS Code, it'll tell you a little bit about what it does. But based on the text box, what will it return?
A match object?
A match object, exactly. So a match object is not a string, which is, it's not like a super important difference right now, but it will be more important as we go forward. So it's always good to know what your functions return. Sometimes it might be a string, sometimes it might be a list, sometimes it might be some weird object you've never heard. So let's take a look at this right now, and let's see what gets returned when we run this. So we see indeed that we get a match object, and let's break it down. So what information does this match object give us? Well, it gives us this thing called a span from 11 to 14. So I guess I'll just say it. The 11 is going to be the starting point of the match string as an index. Remember, strings are lists in Python. The 11 is going to start at the 11th character. It's going to end by character 14. So it's 3 characters long. And the match is going to be the word hot. So again, this is not a string. This is a match object. And we can do some manipulations with it that we will get to. But again, the main thing is it is not a string. So that's what happens if the pattern is found. What happens if the pattern isn't found? Let's add an O to the pattern, see what happens. So hoop is not in my sentence. So let's see what happens if it's not found. We get none. So if it is found, it will return a match object. If it is not found, it will return none. That's nice and simple, but let's make things a little bit more complicated. Let's say that I wanted to not just search for the word hot, but I wanted to search for a word any word that has OT after it. So it can have any character as the first character, but I want it to end with the letters OT. The way we can do that, we can delete the H and put in a period. So in Regex, there are a number of special characters. So in this case, putting a period or a full stop in your Regex pattern, which is what this is, a Regex pattern, it symbolizes that you can have any character and then an OT after it. So if let's say we said like got, hot, not hot. So got, it has some character and then OT. Hot has some character in OT. Not has some character in OT. Hot has some character in OT. Outside does not have some character and then an OT. So technically, these 4 things should satisfy the pattern that we have here. Does that make sense to everyone? So let's see what happens. So again, let's mouse over this and see. All right, so it returns a match object. So we should have 4 matches here. Technically. Let's see if we actually do. All right. How many matches do we have? Not a
One.
trick question. 1. And Art, which word got matched?
Just the first.
Exactly, just the first one. So what this means is that the search function returned the first. I'll call this substring that matches the pattern. It only returns the first one. It will not return all of them. The good thing is it'll tell you which substring you're looking for. In this case, it's going to be the match. It's going to be go. What if I didn't just want the first substring? What if I wanted all of them? Well, the good thing is there's another function that we can use for that, which is called find all. So let's copy paste this. We'll swap out search with find all. Before I hit enter, let's read it a little bit about this. So it takes in the pattern first, then the string. So it's the same structure as our search function, but it returns a list. It returns a list. So the previous thing returned match. This one returned a list of all non-overlapping strings. If one or more capturing groups are present in the pattern, return a list of groups. Okay, we can forget that part. So let's just do the find all and see how the outputs of these two are different. So this should not return the first. It should return all substrings that match the pattern. Let's hit run and see what happens. Okay. Nick, talk me through this. What are the differences between the output of search, which is that first line, and the output of find all, which is that second one?
So search only looked in the string until it got a match, and
Yes.
then it stopped and it returned that, and then find all returned a string of all of the matches.
So, yeah, that's good. Let me ask you one follow-up. What data type does search return, and what data type does find all return?
So find all returned a list of strings,
Yes.
and search returned. I don't know what the brackets are. Oh, object.
So it returned a match object specifically. So inside the brackets, the first thing, basically, Python will give, if you try to print out an object that's not like a string or a list or a default type, Python will tell you what type of thing it's trying to print out. And in this case, it's the match object. So the main thing I want you guys to highlight here is search returns this match object. Find all returns a nice, cuddly list. One thing find all does not return, though, unlike match, match returns the character indices, right? It tells you starting at character 11 and ending at character 14 is where I found the word GOT. Find all just gives you the substrings, nothing else. So it's a critical difference, but one that is somewhat important. There are a ton, a ton of different regex codes that you can use. So, for example, in this pattern up here, we put in the dot for replacing any character. Let's see. What are some other ones that I can think of?
Star.
All right, what's star?
It checks if the preceding character appears 0 or more times.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. So we'll do a dot and then what's another? Yeah, we'll add something here. We'll do the T. So to add in like a bunch of T's. Let's do that. And then let's change this to like a non. So hypothetically, what this pattern should do is it's going to look for any character, and then O, and then it'll say 0 or more T's. So will it satisfy this pattern? What do we think?
Yes.
Okay, what do other folks think? Will the word IT satisfy this pattern?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it won't. No, it won't.
Oh, okay. You
I
can't
left
the
I
answer
left that.
without telling me why you changed it.
Well, because O is not in it.
Exactly. Yep, O
Yeah.
is not in there. So, however, let me ask you this now. If I put a star after the O, Nick, now do you think that it would satisfy this pattern?
Yes,
Why yes in this case? Well, what did adding the star change?
because for the star, it's 0 or more. So it doesn't actually have to exist. As long as it finds an O or a T,
Perfect.
it's
Yep.
going to return it.
Yeah. So let's take a look. Let's see what other things exist that might satisfy this. Is there's no I or an S. Very, not gonna work. Got with a bunch of T's. It's like a G. One O, so that works. Bunch of T's, that works. Non, well, non might not work. But is there a substring of non that might get recognized that satisfies this?
Yeah, on.
Okay. Maybe on. Any others? What about just NO? Right? Because sure, NON, it doesn't have there's no N in here. But if we just stop it at the O, we're gonna have no T's, so that should be fine. And then pot, that should work too. Let's test it. Let's see what happens. So if we hit run, interesting. I'm getting something super weird. What's going on? Anyone have any ideas? How do we break this down? What is going on here? There is a reason, by the way. But I want to see if anyone can get it without me giving a hint.
Oh yeah. Well,
Not Cisco and not Nick, because I know you guys have used Regex before.
Omar, it kind of looks like they're not distinguishing the words between the strings. So it's like just a bunch of letters. So even if you can pull a character from a previous word, it's going to satisfy it.
Not exactly. But that's getting close. Adam, any ideas?
Let's see. No, I'm not really sure.
So let me ask you guys this. What is the shortest string that satisfies this pattern? How long is the shortest string satisfying this pattern?
2 characters.
Okay. Why do you say 2 characters?
Um, well, like when you were highlighting over non, it's taking the substrings and not just the ends of the strings. So NO
Well, so
to
again,
satisfy.
let's just forget about the example sentence. Let's just look at the pattern. But based on the way the pattern's written, where we know that the dot, oh here, let me rewrite this. This should be 0 or more O's, and then 0 or more T's after. So the dot is any character, but it has to be, that character has to be there. The O and then the star means 0 or more of the O's, and likewise for the T's. So unfortunately, it's not 2 characters. That's the shortest. But do you want to try it again? or anyone else?
It's one character, and it's also including white space characters or spaces.
Yes, thank you, Siska. So the shortest string satisfying the pattern is 1 character long. Which character? It's the any character. So hypothetically, if I just put C is my string, this technically satisfies the pattern because the C satisfies the dot. Well, we don't have any O's, so that's okay. And we don't have any T's, so that's okay. However, remember what, so I wrote this down as you guys were thinking, and I realized I forgot to mention this. Regex identifies the longest substrings that satisfy the pattern. So, for example, that's why it captured the whole word IT, because it is the longest substring that satisfies this pattern. The dot is the I, there's no O's, that's okay, and we have 1 T, so that works. However, the space also satisfies this pattern, but the space and the I does not satisfy this pattern, because the space takes up the random character, and then, well, there's the I isn't an O, the I isn't a T. So the space is the longest substring satisfying this pattern. And we can do the same sort of analysis with why it broke up very into its individual characters, but why it included got with the bunch of T's as part of the pattern. Does that make sense to everyone? I know Regex is a little bit weird until you start getting down and dirty with it, to use the expression. But does that concept of matching patterns make sense?
Yeah, and so the word vary, it was just picking up the wild card. So that's why you got individuals, but God actually satisfied it, so it kept the whole word. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes. So there are other wildcards that you can use. I don't remember the whole list off the top of my head, but I know the curriculum page has it. And when we do our wrap up in about 5 or 10 minutes, I'll show you guys what that list looks like. But yes, it's identifying the wild card in all of these little areas. That's also why it broke up non into NO and then an N, right? Because NO, the substring, N, O, and there's no T's. That satisfies it. And then N is the shortest substring, is the next part that satisfies just the wild card. All right. So here, let's just keep the O in just so that we don't break up everything. So if we keep the O in, now we so yeah, that works fine. Let's do one last thing. We talked about the search function, which returns the first substring that matches the pattern as a match object. Then find all returns all substrings as a list of substrings. There's one more really important function that you can use in Regex, which is the sub function. So the sub function is used to replace strings, essentially. So let's take a look at let's see, read.sub. Let's see what this says. So you see here we have a pattern, REPL, which stands for replace, the string, then count and flags we don't need to worry about. So let's read through what this does. So return the string obtained by the leftmost non-overlapping occurrence of the string. So aka everything in find all is going to get replaced by this replacement string REPL. So for example, let's say I wanted to replace everything that satisfies this pattern with let's call this REPL string going to be 1. So I want to replace everything that satisfies the pattern with the word well. So let's do that. So we first need to say the pattern that we want to identify. We then want to say what we want to replace the pattern with. And then lastly, we want to say that we want to replace the in my sentence. Let's try running this. If we take a look at our original sentence, I'm not going to try to pronounce this because it's barely English, but you can see where the words that satisfy the pattern show up in the original sentence and in our find all. By using sub, each of those words has been replaced by blah in the original string. Now, you can also replace regex with other regex, but that's a little bit too complicated for right now. Tonight is sort of just intended to be a very high-level overview of regex. But I guess to summarize, this function will replace all substrings that match the pattern with a replacement. And you can customize this replacement to be whatever you want. That's pretty much the fundamentals of regex. Again, it's pattern matching and pattern matching replacement. So you can identify one instance of a pattern using search, all instances using find all, and you can sub out instances of that pattern using the sub function. Any questions about that before I turn you guys loose in a second?
I have a question.
Go for it.
When we were talking about 3 different databases that had the date in 3 different formats,
Yes.
can you replace with a specific format? So when you do the sub, it actually changes all the dates to a certain format?
You can. Actually, let me see if I can switch my screen share. Because there's an example of this on the curriculum pages. So we'll get there in like 30 seconds, but the answer is yes, you can. So real quick, before we get to that, can everyone see my browser with today's? Awesome. So the first thing I want to demonstrate is this table of characters and what it does has almost all the special characters in regex. There's probably a few more in there. As you can see, this is a long list. There's a lot of special characters in regex. You do not need to memorize them. Please do not memorize. If you want to bookmark this this tab or another one with a similar table, that's the best thing to do. So yeah, this sort of goes through like the search, match, find all that we talked about. And then we talked a little bit about finding and replacing. So this is a great example. And this actually is pretty similar to the date example that I brought up earlier. However, I don't want to explain what it does. Instead, I'd rather that one of you guys tries to walk me through this part of the code. So let me switch back to VS Code because I like VS Code's interface a little bit more. And we'll delete that. Can I have a volunteer to try to talk me through what this is doing? Or anyone who would at least like to get us started.
Well, you're trying to substitute something with your regex string here inside that the date string.
So, Adam, since you started, thank you for that. Talk me through line 56. What is the pattern I'm looking for?
Well, the R in front already stops me because I have no idea what the R does.
Oh, I also forgot to mention this. When you write a string in Python, random string, you write it like a normal string. If you're writing regex in like regex patterns, in general, the way that you signify something as a regex pattern is by putting a little R in front of it. We'll just say the R in front signifies that this is a regex pattern, not just it. All right, so do you want to try continuing with it, or do you want to pass it off to someone else?
Let's see. Can I?
I also recommend keeping that curriculum page with the table pulled up like side by side, because that can explain some of the stuff inside the brackets.
Okay. I'm just resizing everything right now so it fits side by side.
No worries.
Okay. Now is A itself something? That entire, I guess, list right there, is that changing the cases? Like uppercase and lowercase? Is that
So you're right that the thing in the square brackets, which is not a list, unfortunately. It's, well, I guess you can actually kind of say it kind of is a list. So what that is doing is, so this part is checking for uppercase and lowercase letters.
okay?
But what does the plus signify?
Let's see. It checks if those cases appear more than once.
Yes. So the first, so and that's the first group. So here, let's tab this out. So say first group is going to be at more than one uppercase and lowercase letters in a row. Or in simple English, a word. Because a word is uppercase and lowercase letters that's one or more characters long that aren't broken up by a space or a dash or something like that. So the first group, this thing, is telling Regex to find a word. Thank you for helping us get to that point, Adam. Nick, what about the second group?
That is going to be looking for numbers.
Okay. How many numbers?
More than one in a row.
More than one. I think the better term to use here would be digits, just because /d. But so more than one digit, which is, it's basically the same thing as a number or a whole number, because you're not seeing any decimal points or fractions or things like that. I'm going to change this to at least one instead of more than one. So essentially, what is our pattern looking for? The pattern is going to be word and then number. So that's what our pattern is looking. Now, let's go back to the next part. So, remembering our format for sub, where sub will take a pattern, then it'll replace that pattern with something else. And this will hopefully answer your question. Here it has a /2 of, and then and then a /1. So the 1 and the 2 are referring to the groups identified in the first regex. So remember how, again, this pattern has group 1 is the word and group 2 is the number. So what this little regex is doing here, and I'll just make this like regex place. Regex replace, just so we have something here. What this is doing is it's taking that pattern of word and number and it's flipping those. So it's saying we're now going to put the second group first We're going to say number, then of, and then the first group, which is word. So, hypothetically speaking, what will this do to our string? What should this function change our string to? Art, since you asked the question, do you maybe want to take it?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's just gonna reverse the 24 June and then the 9 August. Because you're just changing the number, looking for the number first and replacing it, and then doing number word.
Well, number, and then it's going to add in space, OF, and space in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
So should say 24th of June. Can't write June. 9 of August, 12 of December, like so. In theory. Well, let's run it to just to check. Indeed, it does. So if you want to, do like for example with the year, month, day thing that we talked about earlier, and changing up those. Let's say we wanted to make all of these fit into the same pattern of line 29. It would just be a matter of moving the years to the end and moving the dates to the days to the start. Kind of like the same thing that we did here with the 1 and 2 and flipping those around for the groups. Any other questions about regex before we turn you loose on assignments? Art.
Just out of curiosity, if you were working with 3 databases and you were trying to get all the dates the same, would you actually alter the databases, or would you create a new file and leave the old databases intact?
That's a good question. It depends application to application. Sometimes you may want to change the original database. Other times, you might not see a point in changing your copy of the database. So instead, because let's say you only need the dates in order to like run a specific function or something like that, that generates something that after that you don't care about the dates. So in that case, I would just change it, in like my list or my data frame or whatever else I'm using in Python. So there's not really a good answer to that without saying it depends on the context. But we'll get there when we start talking about databases and importing data in a couple weeks. Any other questions on regex?